Two men stood in the same room. One of them had everything on paper. Better job, better face, better clothes. He did everything right. He asked the good questions. He laughed at the right moments. He paid for her drink. And she left with the other guy. The other guy wasn't better looking. He wasn't richer. He was, by every measurable standard, the less impressive man in that room. And she chose him anyway. And she didn't even fully understand why. If you've ever watched that happen, or if it's happened to you, you know the specific feeling. It isn't jealousy, exactly, it's confusion. Because you followed the instructions and the instructions didn't work. So I went looking for the pattern. I went through 200 stories of men, women actually told from the woman's side, and I looked for what those men had in common. I expected money. I expected height. I expected the obvious things. Almost none of it showed up. What showed up instead were 6 traits, and every single one of them is something you can start doing this week. Here's the strange part. Not one of the 6 is about how you look, and not one of them is about what you say. Before the 6, you have to understand what actually happened in that room, because it explains everything that follows. The impressive man was auditioning. Every question he asked was a small application. Every joke was a test he needed to pass. She could feel it. Not consciously, not in words. She just felt slightly heavier around him, the way you feel around anyone who needs something from you. The other man wasn't auditioning. He was just there, and being around him cost her nothing. Attraction isn't a score you accumulate. It's a feeling in her body when you're near. And the fastest way to ruin that feeling is to need her to have it. Which brings us to the first trait, and it was in almost every story. He wasn't trying to be chosen. The men women picked were not performing selection. They weren't running a strategy. They didn't have a plan for how the night was supposed to end. Women described this over and over with the same word, easy. He was easy to be around. Easy doesn't mean passive. It means there was no invisible pressure sitting on the conversation. She wasn't being interviewed, and she wasn't being sold to. Here's the test you can run on yourself. During a conversation, are you listening, or are you waiting for your turn to say the thing you already prepared? If you're waiting, you're auditioning. Stop preparing and start responding. The second trait sounds almost too small to matter, and it was everywhere. He had somewhere to be, not as a tactic, not as fake busyness to seem in demand. He genuinely had a life that continued whether or not she was in it. Women notice the difference immediately between a man who has to leave and a man who is pretending to have to leave. One is calm. The other checks his phone too much. A man with nothing going on makes a woman the center of his week. That sounds romantic. It's actually a weight. She becomes responsible for his entire emotional world. The fix isn't playing hard to get. The fix is having something real to get back to. A gym, a project, a craft, friends who'd notice if you disappeared. Build the life first. The attraction is a side effect. The third trait is the one most men get backwards, and it might be the most important of all 6. He made her feel seen, not studied. There's a difference between attention and observation, and women feel it instantly. Studying her means collecting information. What's your favorite film? Where did you grow up? What do you do? It's a questionnaire wearing a conversation's clothes. Seeing her means noticing something she didn't tell you. The way she lights up about one specific part of her job. The way she goes quiet when someone mentions her family. You don't have to say anything clever about it. You just have to notice it out loud once. That's the whole move. 90% of men she meets ask her what she does. Almost none of them notice what she loves. The fourth trait separated the men who lasted from the men who didn't. He was unbothered when she tested him. Every woman tests, not to be cruel, and usually not on purpose. She pushes slightly to see what's underneath the presentation. She'll be a little cold. She'll take longer to reply. She'll say something faintly provocative and watch your face. The men who failed reacted. They chased. They explained themselves. They got defensive, or they went cold to punish her. The men who passed did the same thing every time. Nothing. They stayed exactly who they were before the test. That's the whole answer. Don't match her energy drop, and don't panic about it. A grounded man doesn't reorganize himself around someone else's mood. The fifth trait surprised me the most because it's the opposite of what men are told. He moves slower than she expected. The stories are full of men who escalated too fast, too much attention in the first week, too many texts, too much intensity too early. Here's why it fails. Intensity that arrives before trust doesn't feel like desire. It feels like need. The men women chose let the thing build. They were interested, clearly interested, but they weren't in a hurry. They gave her room to move toward them. Attraction needs a gap to travel across. Fill the gap completely, and there's nothing left for her to close. Slow doesn't mean cold. It means you're not trying to lock it down before it's real. And the sixth trait is the one that made women stay, not just choose. He was the same man in every room. She saw him with his friends. She saw him with a waiter. She saw him when he was tired and when things weren't going his way. And he was recognizably the same person in all of it. Most men have versions. There's the version for the woman he wants, the version for his friends, the version for work. Women can see the switch happening, and every switch costs a little trust. Consistency isn't a personality trait. It's a decision you make repeatedly. Be the same man when nobody's impressed as when someone is. That's the six. He wasn't trying to be chosen. He had somewhere to be. He made her feel seen. He was unbothered by her tests. He moved slower than she expected, and he was the same man in every room. Look at that list again and notice what's missing. Nothing about money. Nothing about looks. Nothing about lines. Every single one is about who you are when nobody's watching. And that's genuinely good news, because that's the only part you fully control. Start with one. Pick the one that made you uncomfortable while you were listening, because that's the one that's costing you. And if you're reading this because someone already started pulling away, that's a different problem with a different answer. I broke down the 5 stages of a woman losing interest, and exactly which ones you can still reverse.